Whatever that thing is.
Yeah, whatever that thing is.
Oh my gosh.
So wait for just another 34 seconds.
Okay. Ah. Tell me when it's ready.
It's thinking.
As long as it's not ticking.
Okay, go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamara DeRitter. I am the co-chair for the Land Use and Transportation Committee for Rose City Park, and I welcome you to our April 21st, 2022 meeting. Let's go around the room here and have everyone introduce themselves. Kelly?
So Kelly Davis, co-chair of the Land Use and Transportation Committee and board member. Terry Parker. Terry, turn.
Terry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a little blip there. The internet's not too stable tonight. Terry Parker, board member, committee member, and a rep to CNN. Let's see, next in law, how about Ben? You're on the screen.
Ben, you're up.
Oh. Apologize. I was coughing and I wanted to not do that in front of everybody. Sorry. Ben Joy, neighbor, 64th and Sacramento. And I'll go to Susan. Are we passing off?
Hi, Susan Ferguson, 61st and Sacramento, neighbor.
Pass it off. Nick?
Oh, I can't see who else is there.
Nick, you're next.
Hi, Nick Putnam, Broadway, 51st, neighbor. I'm probably gonna jump off early. My son and I are going to a concert. Raymond.
Are you going to parquet courts?
Longtime resident of
No.
Rose City Park. In January, I brought forward concerns about street improvements, specifically sidewalk improvements, and that's the issue that I continue to work on.
Okay. Zachary.
Hey folks, Zachary Lauritsen with Isaac here, who is sick, so I will maybe be in and out depending on how he's holding it together. Jenny.
This is Jenny Lyman, Land Use and Transportation Committee member, and I live at 63rd and Broadway.
Okay. Just for clarification, myself, Kelly, Terry, Zachary, Jenny, and Sharon are all members of the Land Use and Transportation Committee. And if you'd like to be considered, in becoming part of the Land Use and Transportation Committee, all you have to do is let us know. And then we have to swear you in by a quorum of the committee.
Or
So-
you could be promoted to be a board member also, and could be a board member and a Land Use and Transportation Committee member.
Yes, you could.
Then Tamara makes you cookies.
I do make cookies. Sometimes big
I want to
cookies.
share that I have not been a recipient of any cookies, and I'm deeply hurt by that. And I think we missed Sharon. Sharon, did you pop in yet?
We have to meet in person.
Yes, I'm Sharon. I'm on the Land Use Committee.
I'm going to begin the meeting first by going through our land acknowledgement statement and diversity agreement. So if I can share my screen here. Okay. Let's try again. Okay. Okay, this is the Rose City Park approved land acknowledgement statement that was adapted from the Portland Metro Habitat for Humanity land acknowledgement and recommended to be read aloud at all of our meetings. As a neighborhood, we acknowledge the unceded land we occupy is and its original inhabitants, including the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Clackamas, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalipuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Currently united as the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, the community includes over 30 tribes and bands from Western Oregon, Northern California, and Southwest Washington. We acknowledge that this land was seized through coercion, dishonesty, and brutality. We acknowledge the violent history of Euro-American settlement that sought to extinguish indigenous life from this land. We recognize the enduring influence of that history on our region and the nearly 70,000 Native people descended from over 380 tribes living here today. Many of the major roads in the Rose City Park neighborhood connected Chinook villages between three rivers, which white colonizers named Columbia, the Willamette, and the Sandy, instead of honoring the older names such as Nichiwana, which means Great River, for the largest of the three. Our mission statement is as follows. Rose City Park Neighborhood Association works to build a safe, equitable, and healthy environment for all neighbors, present and future. And then I have one other item to share, if I can get to it. Oh, I'm gonna have to stop sharing to get to it. That's a sad thing. Unless you happen to have it on your screen, Kelly.
I do not, sorry.
It's okay. Oh, that's what I was looking at earlier. Oh, well, I'm going to skip that for tonight because I can't seem to find it. So at this point, I'd like to share the agenda for tonight, and we'll go through that and see if there's any changes that need to be made. Currently, we've got the minutes that will be the March 17th meeting minutes. Then new business, including roundtable. Let's see, talk about the Alameda and 57th roundabout that was introduced from the last meeting, and improved streets. The recommendations.
Tamara?
Yeah.
I did an updated agenda yesterday.
Ooh.
So I added a couple of items. So after the Alameda and 57th one-way discussion, I
Yeah.
included the street vacation at Alameda and 58. And then the chip drop brigade update. So you put that in your suggested agenda item, so I incorporated it.
Okay.
And then it goes to unimproved streets.
Hold on. I'm catching up. Street vacation and at
Northeast Alameda and 58.
oh, where did you go? Chip drop. And what was the other one?
Chip prop is the last thing under new business, and then it goes to unimproved streets.
Okay. And what else did I miss? I thought there were 3 items. Got street vacation, chip drop.
There were 2 items added.
Okay, great. Okay, then we have unimproved streets. Recommendations from the April board meeting. Latest information from PBOT. Working diagram for 64th and Brazil. And then updates on intersections of impaired sightlines. The MP2H, which is the Northwest Streetcar Montgomery Park to Hollywood Hub. One other thing I'd like to add to this is the update for the residential infill. It's called RIP2, which is going to the city council April, I think 27th. Okay, are there any
And-
changes?
And then I added under updates, the Rose City Park Golf Course event.
Ooh, okay.
I would suggest moving the topic that Ben is gonna perhaps address up, so he doesn't have to stay through all of this if he doesn't care to.
That would be great. So maybe shifting that.
Maybe right after the minutes.
Well, we've got the unimproved streets as 2.
As a special consideration for Ben, I would ask to bring it up as early as possible.
Okay. So that's a motion. Do I have a second for that?
I'll
Can I
second
interject-
it.
Can I interject real quick? Can I actually make a motion to move Ben and the street improvements up? So both of those 2 can be first and second, then we can move everything else down below, just to kind of partner on that motion.
Okay, and move it above the minutes?
I mean, just as soon as minutes are done, as soon as we get into business, I would just motion that we do 64th and Brazil, and then we do unimproved streets as our first 2 things before we get into other new business.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not so swift at this. Okay. So there we go. Let's take that out there. Stop it. Okay. With that, do we have a motion to accept the new agenda as amended?
I make a motion to accept the new agenda as amended.
A second?
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. Okay, next we have the minutes from March 17th. Everybody's had a chance to read these minutes, right?
Correct.
Any edits, changes?
No edits, no changes from me.
I thought they were really good. I mean,
Succinct.
yeah, and even has links. Okay, so do I hear a motion to accept and approve the minutes from the March 17th, 2022 meeting?
I make that motion, or second it.
Okay, motion by Kelly, seconded by Sharon to approve the minutes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, they have been passed. So we're going to turn this over to Ben.
Tamara, do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yes, let me do that. Stop sharing the screen.
So
Sorry about that.
I don't have the latest PBOT drawing on my laptop. Does somebody have that they can share so that we can use that as a discussion point? And if not, I'll just talk through it.
I don't.
So it's 64th and the intersection of 64th, Brazee and Sacramento. We have what we have, the poles, the yellow paint, and we've all been very vocal about how much we do or don't enjoy that. And so Scott Cohen and PBOT came back and they had a proposal to remove the posts and put in large concrete planters. I've asked twice now of PBOT, if we didn't do the planters, could we use those funds, allocate them, if you will, to, oh, you know what, I don't have my video on. I'm sorry, I'm being rude. I apologize. Could we take those funds and apply them into a bucket, if you will, for something more permanent at that intersection? And the city has had no response. I'm assuming they have an annual budget and that budget gets absorbed and used and then it goes away and then they have another one and it is, so likely it would not carry through for a year or 2 years, those funds. So the question is, do we leave the poles that we have with the yellow paint, or do we remove those poles and add the concrete barriers, the big planters, if you will, and have that as an interim solution until the neighborhood could come up with an acceptable solution to the broad section that we have, whether it's young families or empty nesters or retirees or whatever it is. I think there's something better than anything that's there today or that PBOT is presenting. But there's a road to go with that. So the question is, do we say go ahead and put in the planters or not? And
have you talked with your neighbors about this? You had any meetings with them?
I have not. I've had, conversations, as I walk my dog, and I was hoping that people could provide input here, what they think. And I really, to me, it doesn't matter. If I could have the money set aside for something more permanent, in a heartbeat, I would do that. And there's a lot of creative discussion going around about potential alternatives versus what's there. But it might be a year, it might be 2 years. I don't know what that looks like to have a neighborhood association or a neighborhood group do we have to create a nonprofit? Do we have to open a bank account for fundraising? And it sounds like a headache. So
Ben,
yeah.
PBOT or not, well, the city will be going through their budget in the next coming weeks, which would include PBOT's budget, because the budget is on a fiscal year where it starts, July 1st. So the mayor, I think, has put a budget together at this point, but I don't know whether it's been delivered to the city council yet, which would include PBOT's budget. So there might be some opportunity there with what you're talking about. I'm not saying there is, I'm not saying there isn't, but find out exactly where the budget is, because it is going to be discussed by city council in the next coming weeks.
And I'm guessing thank you for that, Terry. And I'm guessing their discussions are going to be a little bit, hopefully higher level than 64th and Brazee. So, you know, my question to everybody on the call would be, is it worth saying thumbs up to Scott Cohen, put in the concrete barriers, or thumbs down, leave it alone, and maybe with Hardesty gone and a new mayor, maybe this eyesore will just simply be gone? I don't know what the answer is.
Well, it was my
And I don't
hope.
want to make that decision.
Yeah, it was my hope that you would have a chance to have a living room chat with your neighbors and talk about this and come back to us with what the neighbors want. Because I mean, I'm okay with it the way it is, but I honor the neighbors in that immediate area that don't like it. And so if there is to be a change, it would be up to those neighbors to come up with a design, and we can help raise the funds. And since we are a project of the Central Northeast Neighbors, which carries the 501c3 for us.
So I think there's, and thank you for that. I think there's so we have what we have today. The city is proposing they're willing to put in the planters. And then I would rather down the road, it just is not going to happen in a 2-week period to get everybody on board for what a solution would look like that was more permanent. And I agree that would be a nice thing to have. It's just not going to happen right now. It would not happen. And so the question, in my mind, the question is, do we ask Scott Cohen to put in his concrete barriers as an interim solution or not?
Ben, you may be having, if we don't do that, you may be living with those posts for the next five or more years, because what is temporary with the city often ends up as being permanent. I mean, the whole Slow Streets program was supposed to be temporary for COVID, and now it's become permanent. So I'm looking at it, and I mean, it's your decision than it is mine, to be honest with you, because you live there. But I'm looking at it from that lens, that if the posts are left there, they could be still there in 5 years.
Yeah.
So Ben, would PBOT put dirt in the planters, and then the neighbors would maybe plant them in beautiful plants? Is that?
They have good questions. They have not responded to anything. Scott did reply to me and say that there have been, so I asked him, have there been successful projects with neighbors and PBOT to come up with solutions that benefited the neighborhood? And he said yes, and was putting me in contact with the either project manager or person responsible for that, and nothing has happened past that.
So Susan, do you live near there? You're on mute.
I live at 61st and Sacramento. And I think what Ben is really asking, he's asking a political question. What's the most advantageous thing to do? Will the city come through? I think Terry has been trying to respond to that answer, saying it's kind of dangerous to leave it as is. But I have no knowledge as to what the city would do or would not do. But those of you who have lots of experience with the land use committee, I think that's where Ben's asking this question. Does it make sense or not?
So Sarah or Susan, do you live near 64th?
Sarah does. She lives just across the street from Susan, and I live right next door to Susan. It's right in our neighborhood.
What are your thoughts then?
My thoughts are, I thought PBOT was very gracious, and they were willing to modify something. They bent over backwards to do it. And it may not be perfect, but it is better than what it is now. And I would think, and I'm more than willing to pass out flyers with the diagrams and ask people's opinions all around there. I'm more than willing to do this and see if they agree that to accept the planters for now, and that if some ambitious group wants to put together a massive fundraising effort to put in a shoulder or a low curb or whatever it is, that I forget what the term was you used, Ben, before, to put that in, that had up to a $250,000 price tag to it, if they want to do it, and then solicit help from the neighborhood association to fundraise through the 501c3, that would be fine. I say, for me personally, it would be to take them up on their very gracious offer. It's not perfect, but it's better. And I'll help Ben in trying to gather neighbors' opinions. More than willing to, happy to do that.
Sharon, thank you for that. I would note, I did print out the drawing from PBOT, and I did walk it around to the neighbors all along Brazee to 62nd, and got almost no engagement on it. So, you know.
Could we just do a yes or no and then have them turn it back or mail it in or drop it off somehow to get a response?
Yeah, we probably could.
It's an effort, and that's all I've advocated for, is making an effort on our part to engage the neighbors and get their opinions.
You know what, and a little, the kind of a little bit of the, there's a part of me that says, if the city was not willing to roll those dollars into a long-term solution, because the planters to me are not a long-term solution, then what the hey? If I got one neighbor more than me that cares about it, let's do it and make that the recommendation.
Well, do they know we're talking about this tonight?
You know what? I went around and invited them to other meetings that we've had, and they don't show up. So I don't know how to, engage them more.
Well, why don't we, postpone this decision to our next meeting and let them know we're going to decide on this at our next meeting.
So I would be willing to print something out and walk it around to the neighbors on Brazee, 62nd, along Sacramento there over to 65th, and invite them. I'd be willing to do that.
Okay, and make sure that they know it's a decision.
I wonder if that's the correct approach to take. And I'm saying that because what I'm thinking is that we could say that we are prepared to agree to put the planters in, providing the neighbors approve over what there is now, and the neighbors would be backing us up. But if we were to go around, if Ben were to go around and contact the neighbors, and then we voted it down and the neighbors wanted it, I think that would be wrong. So, I mean, I would think that we would maybe take a straw vote tonight at least and say, yes, we're ready to approve that, providing the neighbors are willing to agree to that.
So if I hear you right, Terry, the approach would be I'd do something around that said, we're going to approve this unless you show up and counter it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's
and
fine.
again, whatever recommendation we have to at that meeting goes to the board for final recommendation, but I think that would be great.
Okay.
And
I-
I'm game either way, whatever the folks there want.
I'll take ownership of delivering those, some handout to those
But I'm,
neighbors.
okay.
I think Sarah
okay.
wants to say something.
Sorry, I was away from my screen when you called on me earlier. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. That's something that Ben said earlier in the discussion, which was along the political lines that Susan alluded to. Ben, what is your thought about what the city may do with that intersection if with the change on city council? Do you think they're going to leave the candlesticks or whatever the proper term is for that arrangement? Or do you think, like, what is your thought on what's the future of PBOT's direction with that intersection, or more broadly, the effort to put in concrete bollards?
I don't agree with PBOT going into neighborhoods and doing what they're doing. We have a lot of potholes and traffic things that are higher priority than this. And I'm hoping that we had an administration that would listen and prioritize better than I think the current one is doing. There was no reason to be, there was nothing that prompted this other than self-funded programs.
So just trying to think through the politics of this. I mean, I understand concrete planters may be more attractive than the candlesticks that are there, but they're more permanent to me, at least in my mind. Putting in concrete planters seems like a more permanent thing. And I frankly haven't seen the drawings or focused on it, so I don't know. And, you know, I walk through there, but I don't see it, you know, out my window. So I don't know if I have a view if the planters are better than not. But I will help pass out flyers as well, because I think a picture is something that people could have an opinion about. I mean, everyone knows what it looks like today, but I don't have a good sense of what the planner configuration would look like at some future date.
So PBOT has done a nice, reasonably nice drawing that we could pass out, that I did print and passed out before, but we can send that out. And I think neither option, in my opinion, is what we deserve at that intersection. And I think there's a lot of creative ways. People have brought up multiple options: traffic circle, over off Deacom, there's a really nice where they created a little park and just kind of shut down traffic from going through, and you could have benches that looked out at the mountain. There's a lot of, those are the discussions I would love to be having versus baseball bats, wiffle ball bats, and concrete planters.
Okay.
And the concrete planters can be moved by a forklift, so they're relatively easy to pick up and put on a truck and take out of there. It's one of the reasons they use them.
You know, even the installation of the concrete planters, I was riding my bike along Willamette Boulevard on the way out past UOP, and they didn't use yellow paint. So we've got all this god awful yellow paint all over the place, and they have concrete planters, and it looks a little nicer without all the yellow paint all over the place. It just feels like they were trying to burn up budget when they did this.
Ben, are the planters on Willamette Boulevard, are they in the center of the street, or are they you know, on
I'm losing you, Terry.
Yeah, you're fractioning. Gary, your connection's not
how
very
do they
good.
compare in positioning to yeah, I know it isn't. I'll repeat, I've seen planters in places where they're in the center of the street, but they're specifically so somebody can't make a left-hand turn, and they're unpainted. They're not for the traffic going forward.
So Terry, the ones that I saw on Willamette Boulevard were not painted. There were white stripes, but not yellow paint fill in. And they were stopping traffic going one direction on Willamette Boulevard. So they were diverting cars down a side street. And it was not, it was not as ugly as yellow paint and 12 feet signs.
Okay.
Susan has her hand up.
Yeah. How were the planters planted, Ben?
You know, Susan, I don't even remember that. I'm sorry.
That would be something else that you'd want to include on this handout. And again, I'm more than willing to participate in that, handing those flyers out. But you'd want to make sure that there was consensus among the neighbors, not only for the planters, but some kind of a plan for how they would be looked after.
That's an important part.
I would suspect that PBOT would have some guidelines or something that they would say. So I'm happy to circle back with Scott Cohen to find out if there's some guidelines that we could get.
Jenny? Jenny, you're up.
Sorry, I just didn't understand you. I just wanted to say, we'll go back to a second ago, someone was saying that those things can be moved with a forklift. I don't think they have a bottom. So in terms of like picking them up and moving them around, I think you have to take the soil out first. You know, because I think they just make those out of manhole risers. But anyway, and then I put it in the chat, but I think in regards to yellow paint being on newer ones and not on older ones, I think that's in response to changing standards. I mean, that'd be a question for Scott, but I think, you know, those things are updated over time. And they're probably just meeting, you know, their city standards. That's it.
Thank you, Jenny. Sharon?
Yes, I've read many back and forths and had back and forth myself with Scott Cohen and PBOT and Sarah. That crosswalk is going to stay. There is no consideration remotely to remove the crosswalk. And it's either going to be protected by those candlesticks, which to me are not truly protection, or they're going to be the crosswalk is going to be protected by those planters. And they are very clear about that. So what's your choice? Is it the candlesticks or is it planters as I hope a temporary solution, but if it's the planters that's not temporary, that is much better than the candlesticks. So, but I would like the immediate neighbors to participate.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, I missed a PBOT presentation, but was there any discussion of raising I don't know if those are diets, the islands with curbs, or the only options are to put objects in there?
Just the candlesticks and the concrete planters. It was the $250,000 amount that would be extruded curb and then putting landscaping in there.
Okay. And not everyone's voting against Commissioner Hardesty. Keep that in mind.
No,
True.
that's okay.
We're going to bring that up.
Okay. All right. So we don't really need a motion, but how about just direction to have Ben and friends go back and provide the illustration and request for them to say yay or nay with the planter bollards. And if we go with planter bollards, there would be dedication for them and the community to maintain those, because those need to go hand in hand. If we have planter bollards, you want to make sure that they don't look disgusting. So just saying. Sound good?
I think you need to define maintain, because if somebody comes and puts graffiti on them, Is that the responsibility of the neighborhood or is that the responsibility of the city?
I would hope that they already have a standard developed for that, because it's not a problem that would be unique to 64th. And so I'll reach out to Scott about that.
Okay. All right, are we, can we conclude this item and then move on to Raymond's item?
Yep, I think action is Ben will reach out to Susan and Sharon. We'll come up with something to hand out to neighbors and get others' opinions, and see where we go and present it at the next meeting.
Quick question, which is, can someone define what neighbors means? Is that meaning you got to be like within one house of the intersection? You got to be within a block? Is it 5 blocks? Just so we kind of all are on the same page of what that means.
I'm going to walk down Brzee. I'm going to walk down 62nd. I'm going to walk to 65th on Sacramento. And if anybody wants more than that, step up to the plate.
I think it's 300 feet, and that's what we've requested of PBOT, and that's what they've done, and I think that's reasonable.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate that. Jenny?
There's a City of Portland department for graffiti removal, and I've used it myself. There's like a hotline you could call. If you Google, I mean, I can put it in the chat, but I don't know if you need to call Scott and ask about that.
I'll reach out to Scott.
That'd be a good thing. Newsletter.
I went out personally and removed the graffiti and had neighbors chastise me for it. So I would love to know what the process is.
Yeah, there's a hotline. I'll put it in the chat for you. There's a clearly defined city process for graffiti removal.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben. And interested in hearing what comes back. All right. Raymond, let's turn it over to you. And the question about pedestrian access and sidewalks.
Sure. Or does Kelly want to just follow up? But well, as a follow-up to our meeting with the 2 representatives from the city engineer's office last meeting, neither of the gentlemen chose to address the questions that we had posed in the letter to Steve Townsend on February 9th. So as a consequence of that, Kelly and I and Zach drafted a letter to Mr. Townsend explaining our continued request to have answers to those questions. The 2 most important being, 1, why were the streets left undeveloped when they unimproved when the lots were developed? And what standard does the city engineer's office use when they find a hazardous situation? They have the authority to compel completion of streets. But neither of the representatives of the office spoke to that issue. So that's what we'll have an opportunity to discuss with Mr. Townsend personally on the 27th. He was very gracious in responding to our letter and setting up a Zoom conference with us on the 27th. So that'll be an important meeting. Earlier this week, I had sent to both Kelly and Tamara a proposed letter to Adina Long, who's Director of Parks and Recreation. The members of this committee might recall from my January message to them, there were really 2 issues that I was drawing attention to. 1, the unimproved streets and the poor access to the parks themselves, as well as the unimproved frontages of the parks, i.e. that there are no sidewalks along the frontage of Rose City Park, nor the southwest corner of the Normandale Park. According to Mr. Abbey, who represented the city engineer's office at last month's meeting, he said that the city engineer could not compel the Parks Department to improve their frontages. Consequently, I think it's appropriate to address a letter to the Director of Parks and Recreation, Adina Long, and raise this issue with her, as well as advising her and inviting her to join our advocacy for improved pedestrian access to the parks. So that's sort of where we stand now. I don't know whether there's time tonight to review the letters that I sent to both Kelly and Tamara, but those are the things that are percolating.
Raymond, I don't remember the letter to the Parks Director. When did you send that?
Sunday.
Can you resend that to me? Tamara, did
Sure.
you get? You're muted, Tamara. You're still muted.
Here, okay, sorry. It may have gotten stuck in my spam folder. I had not seen it yet.
So
But
Ray,
I-
can you
It was
resend
sent on
that?
Sunday, and I have records of it. I'll send it to you again.
Perfect.
That would be great. Sharon,
So right now, the plan is that Raymond and Tamara and I would join this conversation with the city engineer. I don't know if any of the other board members want to join, but it seemed appropriate for just the three of us. I hope that's okay.
Sharon has her hand up.
Yeah, I had a question. Has this subject now been divided to trying to get sidewalks around parks and then sidewalks on unimproved streets? So those are two different parts? Or is it still connected into one idea of both parks and streets, unimproved streets?
Well, it's
Or,
one idea to improve the unimproved streets. The problem is that a lot of the unimproved streets are adjacent to the parks. And PBOT has pointed out that if those were to be improved, the Parks Bureau would have to fund it. So it becomes the Parks Bureau is an integral player to completing the infrastructure.
Well, my response to that is if this is where the city will pay, if it involves the parks, and if the city, whoever, but not the property owner, is the one that's going to pay, I would encourage that. But if we as a neighborhood association are trying to press neighbors to put up the money in any manner, shape, or form to put in a sidewalk in front of their house, I don't think, one, we have the authority to do that, and I just think that's wrong in general. I would separate it myself and try to get one where the city pays for it and then see what happens in the future.
I just want to say I oppose asking property owners to pay for sidewalks as well. I totally oppose that.
But the point is, Terry, for the last 100 years,
Well, open
the
up your
property,
wallet. and pay for it
Terry, let me
yourself.
finish.
Terry, don't interrupt.
For the last 100 years, it has been city policy that the developer of a property is the one responsible for fully improving the adjoining street, period. This
Where
isn't
did
a
you get
new
that?
rule.
Where
Terry,
did you get that
So-
100 years? Where did you
Terry,
get the 100
stop.
years?
Can you mute Terry?
Why don't you move
Can I-
yourself?
So the point is not that these are new rules. The question is why they weren't enforced upon these properties when they were developed. So this isn't an unfairness. The unfairness is that these people have never contributed their portion to the sidewalk infrastructure. And no one is asking them to pay out of pocket. If at the most extreme, it would be simply a lien placed against their property and some of the appreciated value of their home when it is sold will then pay down the cost of this infrastructure improvement. It's hazardous. It should have been done a long time ago. It needs to be done now.
Okay, thank you very much. Sharon, you have your hand up.
Yeah, the fellow that came at our last meeting, I believe he tried to answer why these improvements weren't done back when. I mean, he looked at the age of one of the houses and said it was 1932 and said, I wasn't around then. I don't know what the answer is at that point in time to why these improvements, the sidewalks, weren't put in during the development of that particular property. So I thought he was very polite and very measured and very kind in his answers, and he was very tolerant because things got very hot.
I disagree. I don't think they did get very hot.
Oh, I do. I felt very uncomfortable myself. It was very testy and very difficult, and it was very hard for me to listen to, and that's my opinion. The issue of putting money up front or putting a lien on somebody's property is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And to put a lien on somebody's property, they may have a reverse mortgage, for instance, and the reverse mortgage person or company, they're the holders of that particular property. And you may not ever be able to get a lien put on the property because they're the ones that have the however the reverse mortgage is, but it's still payment, whether you're paying now out of pocket or you're paying versus a lien. I just, don't think the neighborhood association has the authority to do it. There's nothing that says they have the authority from any document I've ever read. And I just think it's wrong. I'm sorry, I wouldn't agree to it.
Sharon, we are in the information gathering phase of the process. I don't think we've ever said the neighborhood association board ever recommend that the neighbors be assessed or be part of an LID. So we're trying to figure out if there's a way we can get the city to pony up some money to put in these unimproved streets. If that isn't the case, which it isn't looking that very positive, if that is the case, I don't think we're going to make an action that recommends anything about funding these by neighbors, which is
Great. Thank you. I just wanted to do a preemptive voicing of that opinion.
We're still information gathering.
Thank you.
Hey folks, I have a question there. I understand the argument and what you all are making there, and I'm just curious what some other solutions would be if the city doesn't have money and we've got corridors there where people are going to the parks. Like, what other solutions do you all suggest? Or is funding from the city the only suggestion?
I don't know where else the money would come from, Zach. We think maybe the stimulus dollars, maybe there's budget surpluses. The people from PBOT said there's $1 million a year in sidewalk funding or infrastructure funding, but they have like 10 or 12 years of projects to spend that $1 million a year on. And it didn't indicate that we were going to be a high enough priority.
One of the ideas also that might be out there is metro access to green spaces. If they are really wanting to make sure that there is access to green spaces in the community, getting adequate sidewalks so people will be safe to get to those green spaces is an important piece. So there may be funds through them, there may be federal funds for this. So a lot of times there's special earmarks for pedestrian safety. And so I think just pursuing that as much as we can as a neighborhood, if this becomes a top issue that we are to champion for the neighborhood.
I'd be curious to hear too some more, because I'm trying to understand where people are falling on this. Is what I'm hearing from Raymond is the idea that 100 years ago, when these properties were developed and they had appropriate sidewalk infrastructure, for 100 years, people have accrued value. They've benefited from that being done. those who didn't have that cost that has been within their property value, and that therefore, better late than never, it's appropriate to hold the property owner, if that is our view as a society, to hold the property owner responsible, that if something slipped through the cracks and now there is a public harm because people aren't able to walk safely, that we need to do it. And that's the mechanism. It was the mechanism 100 years ago, it was the mechanism 10 years ago, and it's the mechanism now that the property owner is responsible for it. So I'm trying to understand, like, why. I understand the discomfort, trust me, I can understand the discomfort of us publicly at all saying, we think this landowners should have a loan taken out and they should have that, they should pay for it. I get it, that's uncomfortable to do. And I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just saying that's uncomfortable. But that is the mechanism that our society has chosen to do. The landowners are supposed to be in charge of their streets and their sidewalks. So that's why I'm trying to understand why folks are saying that's not in this case anymore applicable. That's the question.
I think Terry wants to say something now.
Yeah, I'm wondering where the 100-year rule came from. I don't think it was around 100 years ago, but I will say 100 years ago, Multnomah County had a bicycle tax to pay for bicycle infrastructure. It was there to pave streets for bicycle infrastructure, but I don't think that, I don't know, I have never heard, other than from Raymond, this 100-year rule that the property owner had to put in a sidewalk. And
it's on the city website, Terry. If you consult the city website, you'll learn.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so we're still in the fact-finding mode, and then hopefully after our meeting on the 27th, we'll get some more information and we can bring that back to our meeting in May. And that would be on May 19th. Sound good?
Well,
I
I posed a question. I'd really like to hear. I mean, I appreciate, Terry, thank you for answering kind of from your perspective. I'd love to hear from other folks. Like, why wouldn't we, not we as a board, but as a society, hold property owners to the expectation to improve their sidewalks? I guess I still am curious what folks are hearing, because I'm hearing the opposite, which is they shouldn't be, which is fine. Like, I hear that position and that's totally honorable, but
No, I don't
understand.
I don't think, in my opinion, Zach, the property owner is responsible, but we as a neighborhood association might decide not to take a role in that process, because that doesn't seem like maybe a role for the neighborhood association.
So just to understand, what you're saying is, like, maybe this is the right mechanism. The city should compel property owners to do it, but that you don't feel it's in our purview to do that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and my thoughts are that everyone has skin in the game that's abutting a derelict sidewalk. Okay, I think not only does the property owner abutting that sidewalk need to pony up some money, but also I think the city should be coming up with some money. And so I would say at that point, since it's an existing condition, there's everybody to blame. And so I would think maybe it would be a half and half situation, and encourage that as a resolution.
Okay, I appreciate you all kind of talking about where you're coming from. Thank you for helping me better understand.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else on this topic at this point, why don't we then move on to new items from the committee members? Are there new items from the committee members that are not listed? Okay. Then we'll go on to the Alameda and 57th one-way roundabout graphic. I had presented that to PBOT as a question for an alternative for 57th and Alameda and Sandy Boulevard, instead of them closing off the eastbound lane on Alameda. It was met with a deafening no response. So even though I've sent it again, and then I actually asked Scott Cohen about it today in an email, I've received no response. So I do know that Scott did ask if we could hold a meeting on that topic of slow streets on Alameda at our next meeting. And that would be on May 19th. So I'm making a request of whether or not we want to go ahead and hold that. I told him tentatively yes.
Scott in his email say that he would put out some notice to neighbors within 300 feet of that we were going to have this meeting.
Yes.
We never really got a response about a traffic study being done and the result of that traffic study being to us before we met with PBOT. So I guess I conclude that there is not going to be a traffic study done.
I'm afraid that's true. And I think they're just going to do it and then say, let's watch and see, which makes no sense. And I had sent them a request to make sure that they do a traffic study with the potential build out of that entire area, including Our Lady of Lavang, as well as if German American Society gets sold. How much could they put there in the way of a number of units, apartment units? And I received nothing back.
I thought April mentioned something when she came and presented the Rose Lane, the huge overview, not so much neighborhood related, but I thought she mentioned something about maybe a traffic study during the questions and answers to her. And then also, because it's being done for the Rose Lane project, it's not being done for the Slow Streets project. And then also, have you contacted the business owners that are on all four corners? I mean, obviously German American, but you have the clinic, you have the hamburger place, you have the herb, you have the bank, and you know, any kind of change in the intersection at 57th is going to affect all of those businesses.
Yeah, it's not my job to notify. It's up to the city.
Yeah, but if you're making a design for a design change, proposing some sort of a design change, you ought to be contacting those businesses.
Oh yeah, with the cul-de-sac, or I mean, with the roundabout, if they thought it might be a decent idea, I certainly would make sure that all the neighboring properties of that intersection would be notified.
Because it looks like to me that you're actually taking the corners away and taking property away.
Well, I was just superimposing what the city has in their design guidelines. I'm not doing anything. I'm just putting it in there as an illustration and asking them to make it smaller. So it would be the city that does it, but I would definitely notify all the neighbors if they would say, oh, this is an interesting idea. Maybe we could talk about that. Then I would make sure that everyone's papered and came to the meeting.
Quick question, Terry, you know, you mentioned about it being it's like to make sure that 57th and Sandy have longer greens for.
That's correct.
Traffic. I just wanted to add, my understanding is they're trying to make Alameda less of a cut through from the northwest to the southeast and vice versa. Because right now the design standard for greenways is 1,000 vehicles or less a day, and Alameda is at like 1,900. And so if they try it by putting the entrance, you know, shortening the entrance amount and exit amount, then it would incentivize people to stay on their arterials, which will be faster because there's more green light, and they'll be less likely to try and cut through. So my understanding is you're right about that, but it's a slightly more like robust rationale. Just wanted to throw that out.
Do you know where those counts were taken?
And are they eastbound or westbound?
Yeah, I don't have that off my fingertips, but I know they're on the PBOT like traffic count website. We can find it.
And I guess what's to stop somebody from coming down Alameda and then cutting over to, what is it, Siskiyou, or using 54th? I mean, we're talking about such a short stretch of Alameda that, and that's why I'm wondering where the traffic counts were, and as Tamara says, which direction they are, because it's only going to affect one direction here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great,
the outbound traffic onto Sandy, not the inbound.
totally. It's a great question of like where the count's going to happen. My understanding is they have like 4 different points of where they were going to do the post count. So I think you're right. Like they need to collect that data to know if it does indeed stop cut through traffic or if it just makes cut through traffic detour even more. I think it's a great question.
And then the other question is how is it going to affect the 54th and Sandy intersection? Because you know you're going to get more traffic going down 54th onto Sandy, which is an unsignaled intersection.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous one because there is a crosswalk within 20 feet of that intersection crossing Sandy. And many people just blindly do a right turn into and beyond that stoplight without even recognizing it as a stoplight and the crosswalk. So that's a dangerous situation as it is right now.
So as a footnote, Zach, your numbers sound about right. They have PBOT. I'm looking at a report right now as it relates to going over and going down through the 72nd, and it's about 2,100 a day, about 1,200 northbound, 900 southbound. So it's a lot of traffic coming through there.
And then just as a corollary, Ben, thank you for that. Beaumont Wilshire Neighborhood Association is kind of in the midst of a conversation. Sorry, I'm eating at the same time. At the corner of Fremont and Alameda to try and limit the amount of entry of cars that come through there. So again, it's like, it's a 2-pronged approach. We're only seeing one end around trying to reduce the number of vehicles on that greenway, which is like one of the primary greenways in the city, at least in Northeast.
Be mindful that there's a school just 1 block to the north, 54th and Sandy, Alameda. That's a very popular school, the Catholic school there. We've got lots of safety issues.
And also there's a, Rose City Elementary School right there on 57th. So you have people coming from the north needing to get their kids to the school from that quadrant, the northwest quadrant of our neighborhood. So that kind of impairs them in getting to 57th. And
correct.
So I'm just
correct.
Yeah,
if we're having safe routes, yeah.
I totally appreciate like the concern around all of those pieces. And I think I would also recognize that the status quo of high-speed traffic going through Alameda through that stretch, cutting through from the northeast to the south or northwest to the southeast and southeast to the northwest, vice versa, at double the rate of a greenway is also a safety concern. So like status quo to me is not appropriate. We could talk all day about whether the solution, the proposed solution is the right solution. But I think I just want to make sure we're all like aware that the status quo is also not hitting standards of what the city expects.
So can I move that we invite Scott to our May meeting and hear more about this, and we encourage him to send out flyers to all the neighbors and the businesses?
I second that.
Is Scott the right person? I mean, he's one of the right person, but I'm wondering if we should have somebody from Rose Lane as well.
Why not just in the invite, Kelly and Tamara, just ask him if you know about Rose Lane as well and can speak to that, great. If not, can you bring someone who can?
But specifically about our section of Rose Lane. It's not the full length like we got the last time.
Okay, I accept that friendly amendment. How about you,
And
Kelly?
that would probably either be Zeph or April.
Yeah, probably so. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded with the amended recommendation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Should be a spicy meeting on the 19th. we'll see if we can actually get in-person space for that meeting. I'm not sure if we can get that space over at the Albina Head Start auditorium again.
Do you want me to reach out to Early Head Start?
Could you?
Sure.
That would be great. And meetings like this go much better when we actually can talk to each other face to face.
I'm getting zoomed out. I'm tired of Zoom meetings.
Okay. Slow streets. Slow streets. Next one is slow streets on Sacramento.
Nope,
And-
street vacation at Alameda and 58.
Oh, sorry. You want to pick that up? I think you and Sharon and Zachary were talking about this.
Yes, this came up a couple years ago. And I went and talked to the property owner, and then I brought it to the land use committee. And as the letter that I forwarded, the map was so poor, as the fellow described, it is everything behind the sidewalk. And because that triangular shaped lot has had such difficulty keeping a business there, and these people seem so sincere and wanting to make it work, and seemingly has kept it going through the nightmare we've all been living through. I can't imagine that there would be any problem with that vacation. That's my opinion.
I just had a great conversation with Winston this weekend. He's the owner. And I concur with Sharon. Like, he was talking about all these cool ideas of landscaping, providing some shade, activating that space south of the building. And that the reason he hasn't invested the money is because he didn't own the property. And that's just, stopping him and probably past owners as well. And that he would love to have support to own it. And then he can put some money into it and know it's not going to disappear if the city decides to change the right of way. So I'm with Sharon. I'd love for us to support that.
It seems like to me that the calling it a street vacation is kind of misleading from what I've heard. And I had this discussion with Sharon offline, but because she told me what was going on. And so to call this a street vacation, really it's not. It's public property vacation, but not necessarily part of the street itself, the roadway or the sidewalk.
So I move that we support the street vacation application from Winston.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, yay. And there was another item. And I typed it.
Chip drop brigade update. Is that a board thing or is that a land use thing, Tamara?
I think it's a board thing, but I'll talk about it. I have requested of the board to support me in leading a chip drop brigade for Rose City Park that would be sending out, or actually doing door handle flyers, asking people for permission to put chips on their street trees, on the roots of the street trees. The fact is that within one block, of my house, there's already 5 dead street trees due to climate change and the drought that we're continuing to face. And I fear a urban fire, honestly. And so in talking with my friend Chad Honnell, who's going to speak at the next general membership meeting, he's encouraged me to put chips around my conifers and trees as much as I'm able, up to the drip line, and to keep them as moist as possible during the summer months. And I see that as pretty much the only way in which we can help save these conifers and older trees that are currently being starved by the weather. So I asked the board for their support. They gave support, and I did approach Allison Stoll at CNN, and there is some funding left over that they did not spend on grants, as Terry pointed out. And so I think I can get funding for the flyers and for even, maybe some refreshments for these events. And the idea is to do it in phases. And I would start here in the southwest corner where I live, and just start papering the door hangers and getting responses. And then once we receive a critical mass of respondents from an area, then work with Friends of Trees and Urban Forestry and sleuth out the best place to locate the drop, and then move forward based on their recommendation of how to do it for which trees. And not all trees need or like to have chips, but most of them do. And so would be based on their recommendation and how far back from the trunk the chips would lie, and then how they would be distributed, how deep. I think it's not more than 4 inches. And the idea is that this would be basically free to the neighbors. And I would ask for funds and donations for $20 per drop, and try to get that through CNN, and if not, do a GoFundMe site. But the idea is to get as much out there as possible before the summer heat starts hitting our neighborhood again, and to preserve as much urban canopy as we can. Any questions?
Me. Sharon, it's Jenny. I went to a thing a couple years ago. I was just trying to Google it. There's this organization called Trees for Life Oregon. And I went, some neighborhood association sponsored an event where they gave these street tree watering buckets. And they gave me one for like each property that I owned. And they give you kind of guidance on deep watering street trees in the kind of changing climate. Maybe you're nodding your head. Do you already know what I'm talking about?
I think they're a Facebook page.
Oh, yeah. Well, I found them on a website. I just had my husband run to the garage and look at the language on the bucket. But like a neighborhood association sponsored an event where anyone in the city, we went like way out in Southeast, but like anywhere in the city could go get these buckets, and they're designed to deep water your street trees, and they're free. So like your bark chips sound awesome, but like maybe this is just like kind of another thing in that same line that might also help if you can get people to participate.
Yeah, if you could put the website on the chat that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. I couldn't find anything about events for this year, but I did see a note that like the neighborhood association, some neighborhood association sponsored an event last year.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, Tamara, just
Yeah.
a question on the trees that you say have gone dead. Are we talking about young trees? Are we talking about trees that are fully matured?
We're talking about all ages.
Okay.
Yeah, there's Chad was telling me about Douglas firs being okay, but really the Northwest cedars are dying at a rapid pace. He's been taking out 100-year-old cedars. In fact, Kelly was saying that he had his tree had to be taken out. Was it a spruce, Kelly?
No, it was a cedar tree.
It was a cedar tree.
It was 100 feet too.
Wow.
Well, the reason why I was asking, because there was, I think last summer, we've had a couple of trees on my street that have gone, but they're very, very old trees, and we're not talking about evergreens. We're talking about, I don't know what kind of trees they are, but I think that they've just, the one in particular, I think it finally, it was raising the sidewalk, and you know, it was from sidewalk to curb, and it was too big for even where it was by the time it reached its maturity. And I'm just wondering, and that's why I was wondering about what type of trees we're losing. If it's
It's
like
all types, actually.
like the park blocks, you know, that the trees are 150 years old and they're dying because of age.
And some of them are, and that's true. But also some of them are dying at 30 years old, like the plum tree just down the street that the guy was
Okay.
taking out.
Okay.
And the full maturity of that tree would have been at least 50 years.
Yeah.
So there's a matter of, you know, maturity, and there's a matter of can it even reach maturity given how little water it's getting.
Well, I was just curious about what they were. You know, I mean, it's.
Hi, Susan.
I think it's a great idea to do that. And on the door hangers, I would want to see not only offering the chips, but also reminding people that we need to water our trees in these hot summers. They can't look after themselves for months at a time with no water.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of a combination. And if you water them and then you've got the chips, I think that's a good plan.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm open to any and all input. Jenny, you still have your hand up. Did you want to say something else?
Oh, no, just I'm too tired to lower.
Hand
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
But thank you.
I did put a comment in the chat. Is it true the city canceled its contract with Friends of Trees?
Yes.
I would strongly encourage them to renew that. I can't even
Go
remotely.
to the budget meetings. I mean,
Is that what it is? It's a
Yeah,
budget question?
Yeah, put your information in the budget and rally for them, because that's what they're asking people to do right now.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. And, you know, and actually it's interesting because the council was just given the fact that they've actually had a reduction in the tree canopy in the city for the first time in its history. And here they're getting rid of Friends of Trees. It's just crazy.
But you know the reduction in the tree canopy, there's several factors. Population growth. We're building lot line to lot line, new development, bigger houses, you know, bigger footprints, more footprints on the ground. You've got HB 2001, got rid of single family home zoning. That's taking up, you know, the properties being redeveloped with larger buildings. You've got the residential infill, you've got RIP, the same thing there. And this is all playing a part in the loss of the tree canopy.
No doubt.
Well, I planted 2 new dogwoods last week, and they're going to be lovely in my backyard.
Yeah.
And I think the city is claiming that they are doing it themselves. There's something I saw it on the news that because it appeared horrible, and they said they had their own people that were going to do this.
Well, I had to
Good,
plant,
bad, or otherwise, I don't know.
I had to plant 4 trees as part of my permit for my renovation. 3 dogwoods and a tulip tree.
There you go.
All right. Sweet.
I just add one little thing. The scuttle I'm hearing is that the Friends of Trees folks are kind of behind the scenes doing the battle with urban forestry folks who want to take all the money in-house. And so if they hear from constituents, meaning the commission hears from constituents that no, urban forestry is fine, but we want still money going to Friends of Trees. They leverage neighbors, they leverage volunteers. We think that's a valuable resource. That's what's needed at this point. That's the scuttle, unconfirmed, but that's what I'm hearing from behind the scenes.
I think I've heard some of that, and also what Ben said.
Yeah.
Well, I think Friends of Trees is a great organization, and they've done amazing work for our community. Nothing but good stuff. I know that they've gone through their throes of trying to maintain leadership, but it's a work of heart. you know, that they put in, and they leverage a lot of volunteer time. And I think part of that is kind of like neighborhoods. You don't necessarily document how many hours people put in. And if you don't, then people don't understand how much goodwill is out there that is brought forward for these events. Okay. Then the recommendation from the April board meeting, I got that out and sent that copy to the Land Use and Transportation Committee today. So I also put in there that if they already have the design of the bollards for 64th designed and in the storage, that I expect there to be changes to those bollards within 3 months, or they'll hear from me and the neighborhood at city council meeting for not listening to the neighbors.
And you're referring to the height of the signs and whatnot in that sense?
I'm referring to the bollards with the signs in them.
Well, that's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that they're proposing or had proposed at 64th
Mhm,
within our view corridor
mhm, yeah.
viewpoint.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, very good. So that's out. And latest from PBOT, we've talked about that. Okay, now we're to the updates. Intersections and impaired sightlines. Broadway and 47th. Has anyone stepped up and submitted a report to the city about that daylighting that needs to happen there?
So our homework was to go check it out. So I went and checked it out.
Okay.
It's actually the only, my understanding is that there is no parking, one space in on the northwest, northeast, southeast, but the southwest corner, there is a parking spot that should be daylighted. That is not currently. I don't know if anyone else went and checked it out, but that would be the only one that I saw. There's a fire hydrant on one corner and a couple no parking on the other, but on that southwest, there's like parking right up to the edge, and it is a vision impairment. But I haven't sent anything. I thought we were going to talk about it before we sent anything.
Oh yeah. One problem that I see, and I go by there all the time, is people always park all the way up to the stop sign. And so that impairs not only visibility, but also the access, because it crowds the throat. So a second car can't come in at that point.
Are you talking on Broadway or on 47th?
On Broadway itself,
Okay.
going westbound.
And Zachary, were you talking on Broadway or 47th?
Yeah, I was only talking about 47th. That would be the southwest corner.
Okay.
Have you gone to that site, Terry?
No, I have not. I have not. I've driven through it, but I haven't really paid too much attention. But I was curious which streets you were actually talking about, because I understood that the vision triangles should have been on both streets, both 47th and Broadway, where you have the space. That's the reason why I asked that question, that you have the 18 to 20 feet, I think it's 20 feet of space between the edge of the sidewalk at the intersection and the back, because that's about the length of one car. I think they figure a parking space is 18, so rounded off, that's 20 feet. So that's the question I guess I would have is, are we talking only about what we're looking at on 47th, or are we looking at Broadway too? Because you mentioned Broadway and Zach mentioned 47th.
I think that intersection, which is Broadway intersecting with 47th, is what we're talking about. So we're talking about both streets.
Right. But I'm talking about the actual parking on 47th and the actual parking on Broadway.
That's what I'm saying. It's both.
Yes. So basically what we're saying, out of the 8 parking spaces potentially that are there, 5 of them or 3 of them now have no parking signs for one reason or another. One has a fire hydrant, because each corner would have a parking spot on both sides of the intersection. So you times that by 4, and that's 8 parking places. If the parking is removed on 47th, except for 1, that's 3. If the parking is not removed on Broadway, that's 4. That makes 5 that it's not. So that's what I'm trying to get at here. You understand what I'm saying?
Somewhat. I'm most concerned with the eastern half of the intersection, not the western half of the intersection. So instead of it affecting 4 corners, I'm talking about 2 corners.
Okay.
So it'd be the northeast quadrant and the southeast quadrant.
Okay. So you've got 1 of 2 parking spaces on each one of those corners that has no parking signs, or the fire hydrant. I don't know where the fire hydrant is, because you still can park on Broadway right up to the intersection.
You're not supposed to park within 15 feet of a stop sign. But in this situation, people go ahead and do that. And so there should be actually a yellow line painted on the curb to make sure that people understand that they're not supposed to park there.
Yeah, and preferably a no parking sign with an arrow.
Okay. And let me make sure I understand. Zachary, you were talking about the parking that is on the southeast corner of 47th at
Southwest.
Broadway.
If my memory serves, it's actually the southwest. I could go
Southwest. Okay.
Yeah, I think I actually think the 47th. If we're trying to prioritize, if we're following the letter of the law, then it is on 8 spots, as Terry was pointing out. If we're talking about kind of application, it's crossing 47th. People need to they can make themselves visible. If the 4 corners on 47th are no parking right now, it's 3 of 4. But again, if we want to advocate for following the letter of the law, then I think what Terry said is right. We need to put in yellow and a sign and just request that from the city and see if they'll add it to their list of vision triangle intersections. Just depends on if that's what everybody wants.
I think it's a hazard. So I would like to make that motion and have them request that PBOT go ahead and daylight that intersection. So it's good visibility. For both pedestrians.
I would suggest you use the word vision triangles, because that was the terminology that was, at least they were using several years ago for when you're doing both corners of both corners of the sidewalk.
Have people been complaining about that intersection?
Joe
Where
brought
did
it
that-
up as a complaint.
Who
And
did?
Joe
I'm sorry.
Anderson, our intern
Okay.
Oh,
on the board.
not Joe Schaefer from Hollywood.
No.
She lives on 46th between Halsey and Broadway.
Well, I know. That's why I clarified it's Joe Anderson.
Yeah.
And I live just down the street. I'm at 52nd and Broadway. So I go through that intersection daily.
And buses go through it every day.
So all you're asking is for what is correct law to be enforced.
That's correct.
That's all you're asking. You're not asking for any specific change to what's already in law or policy.
Nope.
I think we're asking for it to be marked to correspond with the law. That it actually have signs and markings, whether it's yellow paint or a sign or whatever. Yellow paint can wear off, so.
Or get covered by leaves.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is
So
there a
that-
crosswalk across 47th there?
No, there's not a painted crosswalk there. There is one, there's supposed to be a crosswalk everywhere there's sidewalks, but no, you go up to Hancock and there's a crosswalk there to get to the Saturday market.
Maybe you guys already talked about this and I just missed it. I sort of zombied out for a second, but is this a pedestrian priority street? Like, does the city call this a pedestrian priority street? Do you know?
I do not know.
Zach's shaking his head.
Don't think it is, but don't quote me on that. I don't think it is, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, they have a website about work they're doing for vision clearance at intersections to address exactly this. And it says it's applied to pedestrian priority streets that include city walkways, neighborhood greenways, and federally classified arterials and collectors. And high crash.
47th may be a pedestrian oriented street. I'm not sure. I don't think Broadway is considered a pedestrian corridor, but 47th may very well be.
So given that it's 8:38, do we want to make a motion on this to proceed, or do you want to table it? Or I made a motion, but no one seconded it. But what do you want to do?
You want to add a request for a crosswalk there?
There's already one at Hancock. Not sure if that's overdoing it because that's only one block away.
That's true. It might be.
Yeah, Hancock's considered a greenway at that point too.
It is. So I think they have to be spaced out. That'd be my guess. We can always ask.
I was just wondering if it was a convenience route for the farmer's market, if that might be
Oh, it definitely is.
special reason to add another crosswalk. It's such a busy street.
Broadway is very busy on with kids and wagons and all this other stuff on Saturday when the market's open.
So they do use that. So they do from
yeah.
Broadway to cross 47th to get to the farmer's market. Well,
Yeah.
I would request a crosswalk there myself.
All right, I'm going to make a motion to amend your motion, which is we're going to request vision triangle or site triangle application of no parking and a painted crosswalk.
Yeah, and I just was doing a little more research here while you guys were talking. I realized I could zoom in on the map on their website. It is an eligible street at that intersection. 47th is on their map as being eligible for these vision clearance with no parking 20 feet from the intersection. So it's probably just a matter of someone making that request.
Okay. We're making that request. I
And
second that motion.
the other thing is that the bus, at this point, the bus turns there. The 77 turns there because it turns off of Halsey on 47th and goes down Broadway, but it may not after the thing at the transit hub is built. That could very well change.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay.
Tamara, I put the link in the chat again for this street.
Sweet.
Obviously I haven't digested all this while we were talking, but there seems to be a way to do this. Oh yeah, report intersection visibility issues. There's a phone number for it.
Sweet.
Michelle Marks.
Michelle Marks, got it. Judy. All right. Okay, the next item we have is the streetcar, MP2H, which is the Northwest Streetcar Montgomery Park to Hollywood.
So I reached out to Barry Manning at the city and asked him about, because the information we had gotten was that they're behind or haven't proceeded on the east side report. So what he confirmed is that they're working on finalizing the east side report, which will have some broad observations about future land use. So he didn't think that it would be appropriate to review that with us until June or July, maybe.
Oh, really?
So I'll put this on my tickler list to come back to him in June or July. He did forward to me some links for some urban design concepts and alignment options. And I couldn't tell if we had already seen those or not.
I had
They had-
not.
They had surveys couple of years ago. They had surveys about it, but
Anyway,
I
I
don't know whether it
will
was
send
COVID or
everybody,
what. But
I will forward this email from Barry to you so you can see the links for these design concepts and options analysis or alignment options. They look pretty familiar, but maybe they've been refined. Anyway, I'll send that and then I'll put it on my tickler list.
Great, thank you. Any update on the Hollywood Hub?
So I reached out to Libby Winter from TriMet. She says that they have, she'd be happy to meet with us anytime, anywhere, and present anything. She's so accommodating. Anyway, she said that they have awarded a design contract to Mayor Reed and DEA to make progress on the design concepts that they shared last year. And she'd have more refined concepts to share in about 2 to 3 months, which is again, June or July. What I don't understand just personally is that Mayor Reed is a landscape firm and DEA is an engineering firm. They had an architect on board early on. So I'm not sure what they're doing with Mayor Reed and DEA. Maybe they're just doing site planning. But I will put this on my tickler list to get back to her and invite her to a June or July meeting.
Well, what we also wanted was to make sure that they came to us with an update of the transportation study that they were doing about the stops, because we're most concerned about how the flow of traffic is going to be altered on Halsey if they move the bus stops from Broadway over to Halsey.
Okay, I'll have to reach it back out to her and ask her about the traffic study. I didn't do that.
Okay.
actually, it's a double whammy camera because they'll be staging the buses on the street where the circle is now that they run around in. Those buses will also be staged on the street, and it's going to have a big impact, although not our neighborhood, but getting into our neighborhood onto Halsey
Right.
at 42nd.
I agree. And that's an already congested area.
And I know Hollywood's worried about that too, because I've had that conversation with Joe.
Good. Good. Okay. We do have one thing that I added to the list was that the city council is going to be reviewing the RIP 2, which is the final language for the residential infill project at again on the 27th of April, which is going to be next week. So if anyone has anything to say about that, I haven't really reviewed the material myself. So
Tamara?
Yeah.
I haven't reviewed it either, but it's for larger lots, which for the most part isn't going to affect our neighborhood because we're mostly 55 by 100 lots. It may very well affect something like the Harriet over here, but
you broke up.
For the most part, it's not going to. Pardon? It may affect the development behind the German American Society, but it's not gonna affect the majority of our single family homes because it's for the larger size lots.
I don't think that's true, Terry.
Don't you?
They had a link in the information that I saw, and so I clicked on the link. You can put in your address. So I put in my address, and for me at 51st and Tillamook, I can do a fourplex. Well, I can do a duplex, a triplex. I can do a duplex with 2 ADUs. The max, I could do a cluster, which is, 4 or 5 on my property, and at the worst, there's a plot. When I put in my address, they told me all the things that could happen on my property as part of that RIP.
I thought most of that was already in place.
Well, I don't know what RIP 1 and RIP 2 is.
I think they're just finalizing the actual implementation language. And as far as I know, the implementation language has not been, we haven't seen any development based on the RIP 1 because they haven't finalized the language.
Because I'm getting emails also from United Neighborhoods for Reform, and it was pretty much their opinion that it was generally the larger lots. It might be redoing some of the language that was already agreed to, but what you were telling me, Kelly, other than possibly the housing clusters, which I hadn't heard before on the smaller lots, but everything else that you said is acceptable right now.
Okay. Well, we've got just about 10 minutes left. Are there member issues of concern that we can cover at this point?
Tamara, you had me add the Rose City Golf Course event. Do we know
that's
anything
right.
about that, Terry?
Yes, I do, because I'm one of the reps along with Joe, and we had a meeting. It wasn't Zoom, it was Microsoft something, and a little bit difficult to get into. We had a meeting Monday night, and it was just more of an update. The date is July 31st. There will be some sort of a concert entertainment that has been more or less contracted out by the Parks Bureau. I am on, I guess you could call it the history committee at this point, with Suzanne Briggs and one of the concessionaires at the golf course. And we are trying to arrange a meeting for the three of us to get together at the clubhouse as we speak, probably sometime next week, and decide how we want to present the history, or at least start talking over that. And I apologize, I forget what committee Joe's on, but there's going to be lots of entertainment. It's called Community Day at the golf course. They're going to have a big Godzilla, inflatable Godzilla there that you can hit golf balls at for the kids, and they're going to try to put some tours up to the bluff so that you can see the trail. Most everything will be staged behind the clubhouse, and starting at 1 o'clock, the front 9 will not be open to golfers. So they'll be closing it to golfers at about 1 o'clock, and that's more or less when the things will start happening. Are
they going to have a band or
that's why I say a concert? Yeah, I'm not sure who it's going to be, but it'll be an evening concert, and it'll be behind there, and that's been contracted out. So that's why I say we don't know who it's going to be yet. There's a group that does that for the Parks Bureau, and they're going to be doing that. And they haven't come with the name of the group.
Right.
Let's see, I lost my train of thought here. I know what I was going to say. CNN is they needed a second partner into this community day. So CNN is the partner sort of that covers our neighborhoods for the this is the second partner that's coming in. And I am going to ask if we can maybe have a table there, if the neighborhood association wants a table, and possibly even sell our history books. But I haven't gotten that far yet. The meeting kind of went in a little bit different direction, so I didn't get a chance to ask that question, but I will sooner or later. Because we are planning to have information tables there.
Okay. Good.
And activities for kids, you know, the putting green and things like that, being able to hit golf balls, and probably for adults too. It's still, you know, this is another committee that's going to be working on some of the activities, and we'll probably have a meeting in you know, I think a couple of weeks. I think we're going to try to have a meeting about every 2 weeks now.
Great. One last thing, if you haven't seen it already, there is going to be a Rose Festival children's parade, and that will be taking place what is it, June 8th, I think. It's going to be a Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So as far as impacting our streets here in the southwest quadrant of the neighborhood, it's going to be an interesting day. And they're still going to be forming the bands over and getting them lined up at Normandale Park. And then they're lining up the kids up and down the streets, I think starting at 50th and going to 54th. And then they're going to be funneling out on 52nd and going down Sandy Boulevard. So it should be a fun time, and it'll be nice to get some normalcy back in our lives.
I think we created this time at the end of the meeting to share some concerns.
Yes,
Is that
we
right?
did. That's correct.
I'll bring it up. I didn't know if someone else would bring it up, but you know, we invited, you know, Ray to speak, give a little background on what happened with the sidewalks and kind of what's going on in the letters. And I was really taken aback, Terry, to be honest, with how you yelled at him. And then when you were muted, you flipped us off. And that totally doesn't meet what I think is an inclusive environment. We're trying to.
I don't think the muting does. I don't think the muting does. I was very upset because we've talked to Ray before about not putting the onus on the property owners. And you know, is he willing to open up his wallet?
His turn to talk, and you kept interrupting him.
This is what we're talking about, Terry. Like, I don't feel like people can come here and bring ideas up that you don't agree with without being shouted at, shouted down, and now apparently flipped off. And I'm not going to invite neighbors to come join us if that's how they're going to be treated, if they come up with things that you don't agree with. And I mean, frankly, there's been times I don't feel welcome here, and that nothing close to that has happened to me. And when I experienced that tonight, I thought, what if someone was here who'd been shouted out by their parents and they felt traumatized? Or what if someone had been in, you know, terrible relationships and now they come to a meeting to try and advocate in their community and they get shouted at and then they get flipped off? And so I'm just sharing, that's not the committee I want to be on at all, period.
Well, I don't think it's right that you mute somebody, period.
And so
I think this is a very important piece of information that we should all consider. What happens if a member continues to violate communication protocols?
And I would add, Terry, like, I hear you. Your opinion is that is not right to mute someone. Okay. The equivalent of being muted is being interrupted and shouted at. And that's what you've done many times over many months. And so I appreciate you don't like being muted, but you're muting everyone when you do that.
Well, I'm not the only one. I'll bring in Mike. Tamara, sometimes you go on and on and on, and it's hard to get another opinion in. And I'm serious. And I've said that to you before. And it's frustrating for me to sit here and listen and listen and listen. And we're 3 subjects down the road. And how can you back up to something that you wanted to maybe make a two sentence comment into?
That's what the raising of the hand is. There's a function that says, raise hand. And you get called on.
But I will say, as far as we've gone through this once before about not putting the financial burden on the homeowners, that we didn't think it was right. And I think Sharon says it's not up to us to advocate for that. And I mean,
And
it's not gonna,
I understand that position.
I have a sidewalk in front of my house, so it's not going to affect me. But if it were to affect me, I would be very, very upset and probably couldn't afford it. And I think that there's probably a lot of people in our neighborhood, senior citizens and whatnot, that cannot afford the house. And if you look at what happened over in Albina, passing wealth on to your next kin, you're taking that away when you're putting on when you're putting a lien or a burden on a homeowner that the home may or may not be paid for.
Okay, Terry, go ahead.
Terry, are you not going to recognize that the behavior at the meeting and flipping off was inappropriate? And
I admit it was inappropriate, but I also think it's inappropriate to bring back the same thing over and over again, because we've had this conversation. This is the third time we've had this conversation about charging the homeowners, and I think that's wrong.
But Terry, the issue is to have a professional discussion about it. And what I think we would like you to do is recognize that in the future, it would be better if you recognize that you need to be professional at all times and be respectful of the people that are speaking. And we will endeavor to not cut you off. And if you endeavor not to cut other people off, then it's a win-win.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
But if you continue to interrupt, I'm going to request that you be removed from this committee.
Well, there's people that want to remove you from the board too, to be honest with you, Tamara. I won't say who, but they're tired of what's going on. So
is that a threat?
No, it's not me. It's not me.
Not you. You just happen to be the messenger.
I'm just the messenger here. And I do not want to.
I would love for someone else to take this job. I would love for someone else to take the chair position. So anytime you want to step up, go for it.
It's been brought up to me.
Halt. I put in the chat box that maybe we could just write down our communication protocols, and it's written down, and then we all know.
And maybe it can be part of how we introduce the meetings, like the other, isn't this already in there, how we talk about, and that when we introduce the meetings,
No,
yeah, that was the section that I couldn't find.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just like changing my mind as I was talking, but maybe we can be more specific about how we state that in the introduction, and that we can all maybe agree to it verbally or something at the start. I don't know, thinking out loud.
That's not unreasonable.
Yeah, and I'd go one step further that just says, here are the ground rules, and by attending the meeting, participating, you are agreeing to it. And we can put that into the spiel. We don't need to like take a voice vote or something or a signal. I think it's just this is our expectation. If you can't do that, you can't be here.
Well, I think people deserve a chance. People do make mistakes, and you can get a warning, and it can, that can do it. I mean, I expressed my concern about Raymond Saul's behavior at the last meeting. I felt terrible, was very uncomfortable to listen to it. And he completely denied that it was a contentious meeting, but I couldn't believe it. I was pretty astounded at what happened. And so, it's not just committee members, it would be guests who are speaking also, that to try to be careful about manner.
That is super reasonable. And I applaud that 100%. Thank you for bringing it up.
Well, I would like to also suggest that actually, I think some of the questions were answered, but maybe not to the satisfaction of Raymond. Because the one individual that was at the last meeting said he doesn't know what the thing was in that 1932 house, whether the sidewalks were required or not required. The street may have been required, but were the sidewalks required? And I know at one time that was a dirt street, looking at some old pictures.
I think the point, though, that I'm hoping to bring, why I brought this up in the first place, is even if we have those disagreements about if it was answered or not, or if you think something's brought up too many times or not, or whatever it happens to be, we don't resort to yelling and interruptions and flipping people off. Like, we can have the disagreement. I think one of our agreements is we can have a disagreement without being disagreeable with one another. I believe that's what the wording is. And so what you just said there, totally fine to bring up, but not to like interrupt and yell at them when you bring it up. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think that's what I'm hearing from a number of committee members.
I understand what you're saying. And I just, like I said, I don't feel like, when you cut off somebody and mute them, yes, maybe I was wrong, but that was what really kicked me off more so than what.
That's fine. I feel it's not, I just want to say, I don't think it's sinking in, Terry. You're saying but after the end of all your sentences, brother. Like, I just say, yeah, I hear you guys. I'm going to do my best and we're going to come up with a protocol. And here we go.
Okay, I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And it's 9:03. And for the good of the order, I take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hey.
Aye. All
Cookies
right.
next month, Tamara. Did I hear that?
Say what?
Cookies by Tamara next month. Did I hear that?
That is true. Cookies by
Oh,
Tamara.
only if you bring a new board member into the group
Or just a committee member.
or a committee member.
Yes,
Your
I
luck
like that.
is
And I
possible.
forgot to turn my screen down, so I'm running out of battery.
Okay, well, we're
Gotta
done.
go.
Bye,
Okay.
guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.